At the beginning of this week, we had the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack released, and I wanted to give it the week to get a chance to play these games a good bit and, of course, let all the initial reactions get out there online, because there were quite a few of them. But today, I'm going to give my thoughts around what Nintendo has presented here with this expansion pack and where they need to go with it. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So first things first, we have 9 Nintendo 64 and 14 Sega Genesis games that were added. I don't really see a lot of people talk about the Sega Genesis games, mostly because we've kind of already had them on the Switch. There was that collection, and while they do have some offerings like Musha, which is pretty expensive online, so I guess that is kind of cool to have that in there, I feel like most people just ran right for the Nintendo 64 application when it launched. In fact, the eShop had a hard time just delivering it, as I'm sure many people were trying to download it and upgrade their membership all at once. This one is $30 more than the $20 per year subscription we have with the base Nintendo Switch Online. It is completely optional, so you don't have to upgrade to this if you simply just want to be able to play online and have access to Nintendo and Super Nintendo games. This is specifically for Nintendo 64, Sega Genesis, and of course that Animal Crossing DLC that was just kind of thrown in there, which, as we go along, it's going to make some sense as to why Nintendo decided that they needed to tack that DLC on. So first, let's take a look at the selection of games we have for the Nintendo 64. We have Dr. Mario 64, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Mario Kart 64, Mario Tennis, Sin and Punishment, Star Fox 64, Super Mario 64, Winback, and Yoshi's Story. And I have a feeling there are going to be quite a few people who this will be their first time be able to play something like Ocarina of Time or Sin and Punishment or even Star Fox. Mostly because, of course, we've kind of had newer gamers come in and these will be brand new to them. And it's pretty cool that someone will be able to play Ocarina of Time for the first time now in 2021. I do still look at this selection, however, and it just doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, if you look at the selection screen, the bottom right is just gray. It's because they didn't have enough games to fill up the entire screen. Even though Yoshi's Story's box art is blown up, they just still have an empty space there. I went ahead and turned on like the North American, Europe box art, so you can have both of them displayed, and that at least filled up the screen. But the fact that they weren't even able to do that with the initial offerings leaves a bit to be desired. Also, I want to point something out. I think it would be cool if Nintendo did a bit more with the selection screen. I understand it's what we have with Nintendo and Super Nintendo and obviously Genesis that's been thrown in, and it's really just a selection screen. Doesn't necessarily matter in the grand scheme of things, but like the little details would be nice to kind of have for that feeling of quality, right? Just go a little extra step. As an example, these are all box arts we have here, so it'd be kind of neat if you could flip the box over and take a look at the back so people can see like a high resolution shot of what it looked like back then in the late 90s for something like Star Fox 64, even Sin and Punishment. That's a box art that a lot of people have not seen. So it's again, it's not like overwhelmingly important. It's just, it would have been nice to have and just add that little bit of quality. Now, while we're on the topic of quality, let's actually talk about the games themselves. First, though, I will say something good about the games. Visually, they're pretty solid. Like, if you look at them compared to even a Nintendo 64 or, as I have, an Ultra HDMI, you just put them side by side, there's no real comparison. These games are clearly set up with newer displays in mind, higher definition TVs compared to what, obviously, they were creating back then in the 90s. And even if you get the best possible signal as you can out of the 64, the actual hardware, it just cannot compare. That said, there are a lot of weird things going on with these games that are head-scratching to a degree. For example, when I jumped into Mario 64, I was a bit stunned based on the button placement. Like, they have some C buttons for X and Y, and then they have A and B, obviously, as like jump and punch. But then you look at things like how they are handling Z for the Nintendo 64 controller and how they have R and L kind of all over the place there at the top. It's strange to me to see that. So I figure, okay, I'll go in, I'll remap the buttons. It'll take me like an extra 30 seconds or so. No, you cannot remap the buttons in the application itself. You would have to back out and remap the buttons in the system settings and then go back in, which is very weird because you figure, okay, the 64 controller, it's not going to match up well for each game for everyone. The 64 controller is just weird. That is the way it is. So the idea to remap buttons, to me, should have been an obvious thing, but here we are. And it's not just me. It seemed like everyone had the same reaction. You can see Bob from Wolfden over on Twitter. Yeah, he's looking at Mario 64, a game he's played quite a few times, and the button placement, even he can't believe it. But that aside, the emulation itself seems off. And it's something I noticed immediately with a couple of games, but I do know MVG went really in depth with it. He's very knowledgeable around this stuff. So I would make sure I'd check out his video as well before you necessarily buy in or upgrade to this. And this is going to be something we're going to be dealing with, I'm sure, for every release, because I'm actually stunned at what they are running into here from Nintendo. These are their games. It's their system. It's their system from the 90s. You figure this would be something they'd be able to nail. So let's take it from the top. Slowdown. I did notice slowdown in Yoshi's Story and Mario Kart 64. Certain tracks in Mario Kart 64, for some reason, would just have this slowdown effect going around certain bends. And it's not necessarily, again, game breaking, but it was just a weird thing to see. Yoshi's Story is a game that runs at a higher frame rate. It's a 2D style game. But that one, when I was throwing eggs around at certain enemies, yeah, the game would just sort of hitch a little bit. And it was very odd to see that happen with 64 games on the Switch. I mean, it's not like 64 games typically had solid frame rates anyway back then. If you look at certain games, it was downright ugly at times. But still, we're in 2021. We're with more powerful hardware. It's a company that should be very familiar with the emulation around their system. It's a bit strange to see this. We also have the emulation doing some weird things with the visuals, specifically the fog. And this is brought up by everyone. If you're in a Nintendo 64 game, you would have literal fog blocking your view at certain points in the game or far off distant objects. The idea there for the 64 was, well, it'll help with performance or just some visual anomalies, things you're not meant to see necessarily, and it's a way to kind of cut corners and get around what was a very early time in the 3D era. So when you say start up Ocarina of Time and you're in the forest and you look straight across, it looks a bit weird because you just see a tree that's one texture. It's not meant to be like that. You see, for example, in Mario Kart 64 on certain tracks, they just got rid of the fog completely, and the whole thing just looks off. That's the best way I can describe it. There was even mention of a cutscene in Ocarina of Time where Ganon is floating above you because there's no fog to block it off. I also noticed there were screenshots that were posted up for Ocarina of Time as you get further into the game where there will be water in front of you, and you would expect a reflective surface, whereas with Ocarina of Time on the Switch, it's a very weird looking texture. Some people said, oh, well, that's just how the Japanese ROM looks. Not necessarily. Actually, the speedrunner that shared that said, no, that's not correct at all. It typically looks like these other screenshots, but the Switch version, for some reason, is just off. Also, here's a weird one. The controller pack isn't emulated at all with these different games. And it might seem funny for something like Mario Kart 64, where I guess can't save any kind of ghost data, and it's like, oh, Nintendo. But then you go over to WinBack, that actually just requires the controller pack to save outright in the game, which means you pretty much have to use suspend points to get through the game completely. It seems odd that Nintendo would have picked a game that requires an item that they did not fully emulate for this service. The input lag that's been talked about so heavily is hit or miss. Some games, it's very noticeable. Ocarina of Time, I noticed it right away. I was like, whoa, I do not remember being like this. Hooked up to 64, not as bad. There's still input lag, definitely, but nowhere near what I was feeling with the Switch. But then I go over to Star Fox, and it was fine. So I know they're using, apparently they're using the emulator they had with Mario 3D All-Stars and that Mario 64 game in there. So I don't know if this emulator is just not playing nice with every single game and you're getting these mixed results. It's just jarring at times to go from something like Ocarina of Time, then over to Star Fox, and it's just two completely different feelings when it comes to control responsiveness. I don't think this is going to affect the mainstream or most people, but it was something that I was not expecting to feel as much or notice as much as I did with Ocarina of Time. And then we get to the online play, which is another mixed bag. Now, Nintendo appears to be going with the method of online play where if someone has a bad connection, everyone else will kind of just slow down and wait for them to catch up, which produces some weird things, audio artifacting and glitching and weird stuttering and slowdown. Is if you have someone in there that is not playing nice with your connection and they're pulling everyone back, you're going to get some weird looking gameplay. But if the stars align for Nintendo Switch Online and everything plays well, it is a really fun experience. Star Fox was a blast. We did some Mario Tennis, a little bit of lag there, but not bad. But then we did Mario Kart, and it was a disaster. I don't know what it was about Mario Kart at the time. And we moved people in and out to test different things out. Okay, maybe this person's connection isn't playing nice or that. But we were getting different results every single time we started up a new game session. So it's Nintendo Switch Online. That's the best explanation I got. But I do want to talk about something I noticed when I was playing online. And that was, I was playing a Nintendo 64 game, obviously with people from the Spawncast. And we're playing Star Fox. And something I thought back to with the Nintendo 64, specifically these multiplayer games, was that sense of community when you're playing these games. You'd be sitting down with a bunch of friends or on the couch, playing a 4-player game like a Mario Kart or whatnot. And you guys would be talking and laughing and yelling back and forth at each other over it. And I was sitting there playing Star Fox. I was just sitting there in silence playing this game, right? This 4-player multiplayer game on the 64. And I don't know, it seems strange that Nintendo has not thought more about the community aspect of these retro titles, thinking back to what made them so special in the first place. The whole time I'm playing this game, I'm thinking I should be like yelling back and forth and just having a blast with the people I'm playing with here. But I don't really want to get my phone out. That's a whole thing. It's like, do we really want to try to sync this up and have that? Just build in voice chat for this one application, Nintendo. I know you're real serious about this voice app. I get it. But like this in particular, there's no matchmaking, which is a whole issue on its own, right? So you have to invite people in with the friends codes. We've already accepted that these people are going to be in our games. We've gone out of our way to make sure of that. Like, just have us plug in a headset and talk to them. Also, I think it'd be kind of cool if they did like in-game achievements for these different titles. And we've seen some Switch games that have achievements built into them. Nintendo games even, like Luigi's Mansion. So to do that would put a pretty cool spin on some of these older titles. Some challenges you could try to achieve in these games. Maybe get like a little sticker or something. I don't know. They give you coins for your My Nintendo account. Just something fun there. And then obviously leaderboards for any high scores you can compare to your friends. But I think the most disappointing aspect around all of this, the Nintendo Switch Online, the N64, the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, the Genesis, is for a company that's been pretty creative when it comes to their online stuff, for better or worse, I'll admit, this is very generic. It feels very status quo, at times rushed even. They just drop these games on there. It seems like they're not up to a certain standard. I'll say that. Certainly not Nintendo quality, as they like to do with their little seal of quality. I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't come up with anything weird and unique that stands out with this. Like, we've had Street Pass. Okay, that's different. We've had Miiverse. Certainly different. But we have Nintendo Switch Online, and they just kind of drew some boxes on the screen and dumped a bunch of ROMs behind the cover art. And it seems like going forward, Nintendo is just very interested in throwing more and more games on here. Just quantity. Not necessarily thinking of quality or creativeness. And maybe that's the part that I'm most disappointed with right now, is I've come to expect certain things from Nintendo, and it's certainly not online play, but at least with the absence of good online play, they come up with something weird and different, unique that stands out. And they haven't really done that with the service so far, and it's been a while. Like, this isn't like, oh, it just launched. I mean, we're over 4 years in now, so I don't know if it's going to happen this generation or what, but that would probably be the thing that's most disappointing around all of this currently. But let me know what you guys think about the Nintendo Switch Online service with the expansion pack down below. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.